Hello, it's ukulele time. I'm Ben Eagle, Reader's Advisory Library Aide and the ukulele instructor for these lessons. And this is Beginner's Lesson 4. Now you may have noticed I switched up my little theme song at the beginning there. It is now in the key of D, which is convenient because we're going to be playing things in the key of D today. So, this lesson 4, I'm going to introduce the key of D and the chord family that goes with this key. So, we'll learn the main chords that you're playing in the key of D. In addition to this, we're going to work on chord progressions in the key of D. Now, you may notice they sound similar to the ones we've learned in the key of C. That's because they are the same, except they are in a new key. And I'll go through that. And we're also going to learn Camptown Races, an old Americana classic. And that song is easier to play in the key of D, so we'll be playing that. So let's do it! Okay. Now I said at the beginning that we'd be playing in a different key. I should just go over what a key is real quick. The key signature, or the key of a song, is the notes that it would be centered around. So, if you remember from the chord progressions we did, when we started on a C chord and we ended on a C chord, that basically means it's in the key of C. Now, it doesn't always have to follow that rule, but that's basically what the key is. It's where sort of the center of the song, where there'll be tension and release in the music, and then when it comes back to that tonal center, that's what it is. So all the chords in there are going to be built around that note, and they come from the major scale of that, which we can go in another lesson. But that's where all the different chord shapes come from. So we'll look on the screen here. We have the D major chord family. Now you can really play in any key, but some keys are easier to play in on the ukulele. Namely C, that was the easiest. F is pretty easy once you learn a bar chord shape, which we'll be doing one bar chord shape today. I'll be covering that. Key of G is fairly easy, and D. So those are pretty common keys to play in the ukulele. So we'll be going through these D chords here. I'm going to go through each of the chords with you because some of these shapes might be a little tricky, especially the D major shape and then the B minor shape, which includes barring down or pressing more than one note with one finger at a time. So you'll notice that there's one chord we already learned, the G. That's another, it's a shared chord. The key of C also uses the key of G, so does D. And then we've learned one A shape, but we've learned A minor so far. So there's A major, B minor is new, then A7, another A shape. So we would have had A minor, then we'd have A major and A7, some of the most used types of chords for that. Now you'll notice there's two A's in there. They're basically still the fifth chord of the chord family. It comes from the scale, which would be D, E, F, G, and A. After G, it goes to A. Remember, there's no H in the musical alphabet. So that would mean it's the fifth note of the D scale. Now I'll cover the theory in another lesson, but just to go over that the A major can also be an A7. So the fifth note in a scale, or the fifth chord shape, can also be a 7. And you'll see them used a lot like that in songs. So, let's look at D major. Okay, So remember looking at the chord charts. It's like looking at the neck of the ukulele like that. And you'll notice that all the notes are clustered on the second fret. And the fingering I have marked is really the best way to get all your fingers in to the second fret. So let's start with the first finger. We're on the C string. Good children. C string, second fret, first finger, very tip of your finger. Now usually when you press down, you're going to go closer to the frets. For this chord, you might have to go backwards a little bit because you're going to get your other two fingers in on the same fret. Now your second finger goes on this G string, still second fret. So it's right above where your first finger was. And then your third finger, still on the second fret, on the E string. So I have all three of my fingers on the second fret in that shape on the screen. So if you have trouble doing this, it's okay. You're just going to try to get the tips of each finger. It might feel uncomfortable for a little bit. But we're going to go through the chord progressions with this new key, just like we did in the key of C. So you'll be going back and forth between this D and G. And if you have to do that, just even this, for your practice routine for the week or a couple weeks, that's fine. Just work on those switches until this starts to feel comfortable. And notice you want the last string in the D chord open. So when you're working on that, just the very tips of your fingers, work on getting each note in that chord so you can play it clearly. So I'm just picking each note in that chord. If you hear that one is like starting to mute, you might have to adjust your fingers a little bit. Okay, so that is the D chord. The G chord we already know. Okay, so far they're getting easier than the D chord. A chord is like the A minor, but you're adding one extra finger. The one, your first finger, on the first fret. So you have this shape. Second finger on the G string, first finger on the C string on the first fret, with two open strings on the bottom. Okay. This one, you're going to be like, what's going on with this chord? What's going on with this chord is this is called a bar chord. Now some shapes, in order to play them, some chords, you have to do this bar chord. It means you're pressing more than one string at the same time. So this is when you can kind of break that rule about using the tips of your finger. When you have to play more than one string at the same time, you can't really use the tip of your finger on all of them. So I would start with the tip on, so if we're looking at the B minor chord, where your first finger is, you won't be using the tip of your finger, but you'll be pointing to this string right here with the flat part of your finger. And then you also want to lay it flat on the other two strings. So it's laying flat across three strings, you'll notice. Just like that. You'll also notice when you try to do this chord, it might be difficult to keep your finger flat when you try to get this next note in there, your third finger, which is going on the fourth fret. So you'll notice there's one fret between these two. So this one reaches up here and does that. So what I was gonna show you is, notice how the joint of my finger kind of bends backwards when I do that. You have your finger can bend like that. If it can't really bend that way, that's okay. You can still manage to do it flat. But if it can, that can help you with other chords later on. Whether it bends backwards or not, you're going to have to reach this note up here. So you might have your hand more back this way. Now this chord shape is going to take some time to get used to. So I included it in some of the chord progression exercises. Luckily, the main chords that you use in the key of D are D, G, and A though. So we won't be using the B minor too much today. But it's a good chord to work on because there's going to be other bar chord shapes like this that we come across later on. You won't be using them all the time, but you'll want to be able to switch to them effectively without it sounding too obvious that it's difficult. Then the last chord shape is just another version of the A. You can do the A7. So if you're doing A like that, then you take your second finger off and you have an A7. Sometimes you'll do a combination of those in songs. You'll do the A and then the A7. Now you might not notice too much difference when you hear them, but there is a little bit more tension in the A7. So what that does, it's pulling you back to the first chord in the key, which is D. So when you play that A7, your ear wants to hear that as the release. Okay, so that's all the chords in the D major family. Now we're going to look at ways to use them with chord progressions in D major. So let's look at those. Okay. This is chord progressions in the key of D. Now, like I mentioned at the beginning, this might look similar to what we did in the first lesson, and that's because it is. We're just learning the same kind of chord progressions in a new key. So I'm just showing you here that you can play the same things in another key. That's called transposing. When you're playing something that you already know in one key in a different key. And we can talk more about that later on. But now it's just good to know how to play these exercises. Just get, that physical dexterity down in your hands. So, D to G. If this D chord shape is tricky to you, you might be doing just numbers 1 and number 2 over and over, just going back and forth between those two chords. Now I'm showing you all down strums just to make it simplified. Once you get these down, you can do whatever strum patterns you want. I just don't want you to worry too much about what strum pattern you're doing. It's mostly about getting those chord changes right on the beat. So, if you're going through exercise 1, you got that D chord shape, you got the very tips of your fingers on there. And you're just going to go back and forth. So, you count out loud or count in your head or tap your foot, whatever works for you to follow along with that 4 count. Remember, most songs are in 4/4 time. So, you're always counting to 4. Always counting to 4. Over and over. Infinitely. Oh, you get the point. So you're counting to 4. So, if you're going through this, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Then there's a repeat sign. That means you can keep doing this over and over. But you want those chord changes to happen right on the beat. It might take you some time to get there. 1, 2, 3, 4. New chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. And 1, 2, 3, 4. If that's tricky for you, you can just work on going back and forth like this for a while without even doing the exercise, just switching the chord shapes. What you're doing is training your fingers to go back and forth. So then muscle memory takes over. That's where you automatically know where to go without having to think about it, the more you do these chord shapes. Okay, so that's exercise 1. Exercise 2 is very similar, but I'm going to show you a little trick. Actually, I used this trick in the first one too. When I was switching, I wasn't even lifting my first finger. So when I did, I'm looking at exercise 1 again. When I did this D shape to G, my first finger acted as a pivot. So I didn't even lift this finger to change because it's a shared note within each chord. So see? That makes it easier to change. You only have to move 2 fingers. That to that. That to that. This finger stays down the whole time. So it's like your anchor, your pivot. So now in exercise number 2, you can do the same kind of thing. Except your finger is going to slide backwards 1. Instead of staying in place, when you go to the A chord, you're still on the C string, but then you're moving back 1 fret. So your D shape, then your first finger slides back for the A shape. Then it slides forward again for the D shape, then back again for the A shape. So it's just sliding back and forth. I don't have to lift that finger at all. What you're doing is just trying to save your hands time. You're teaching them to take the path of least resistance, the quickest way to the next chord. And if you have to lift all your fingers each time, it's going to slow you down. It's going to slow you down when you need the speed. When you need the speed is when you're trying to get to that next chord right on the beat. So then once you get those transitions down, you do the count like on the first exercise. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then always end on the D. That's what chord all these are in the key of, D. You can end on the chord you started on. Think about it that way. Okay. Now, exercise number 3 is that 12-bar blues pattern we looked at before. And I'll just go through that. Now we know how to switch to the chord shapes. I wouldn't move on to any of these until you feel comfortable switching back and forth between the chords. But now you have that down. Now you can get the feeling and hear what it sounds like to play that 12-bar blues pattern in the key of D. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then, just to play it a little faster, just so you get the ear for that kind of whole chord group, we have 12-bar blues pattern. Pattern number 4 is the only pattern I'm sharing today that's going to use the B minor shape. Because B minor is frankly a little difficult if you're not used to these bar chord shapes. Okay, I'll go through it. This is that doo-wop pattern that I shared in the first lesson. So a lot of chord progressions are going to throw in actually the 6th chord of the scale, D, E, F, G, A, B. That chord is often thrown in. So the 1st chord, the 4th chord, and the 5th chord are the most common ones you're going to run across, generally, depending on what kind of music you're listening to, I suppose. But in a lot of popular songs, those are the main ones. And then the 6th chord, that minor shape, is going to be thrown in a lot. So the other 3 are all major chords. And then we have that minor chord thrown in there. So take your time with this one. I'm going to go through it fairly quickly just so you get the idea of what it sounds like. We have the... Then we can play it again. I was starting to hum one song that was pretty recognizable. I kind of tried to change it up a little bit there though, so it was any doo-wop song. Okay, so that's the chord progressions. When you're working on these, again, your practice routine can be 10 minutes to half an hour to an hour, however much time you can set aside each day. But if you can do it daily, that's the most important thing. So you might just start out, this is a new key to play in, so some of it is like learning. It's not just an addition like the last exercise is like one new thing. There's a lot of new things going on. So you might just be going back and forth between 2 chords for a while. That could be what you're doing for even up to a week until it feels comfortable for your hands. Then you might want to do chord progressions 1 and 2, just... Then you can switch it up. If you're not ready to do the next 3, you can do different strum patterns like we've done. You can do 1 and 2 and 3, 4, 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 or any pattern you feel like playing. The possibilities are endless. And then once you feel comfortable with that, then try that 12-bar blues pattern. Kind of get that memorized, and then get that doo-wop pattern, number 4, memorized as well. Okay, so that's the chord progressions in the key of D. Now we're going to put some of this to use, and I'm going to show you a popular song, old folk song, an Americana one, Camptown Races. Okay, Camptown Races. Okay, sharing songs like this. 1, this was a recognizable melody I could play in the key of D that I thought a lot of people would know. 2, one of my criteria for figuring out a recognizable melody would be one that's in the public domain. So one published before 1920, whatever it is now, I think 22, 23, are songs in the public domain. So it's a recognizable melody that is in the public domain, so I feel comfortable sharing it live on this video. And it's an easy one to play in the key of D. So, with the tablature here, I'm going to show you an easier way to play it, kind of, because tablature doesn't show you which fingers to use for this. I'm going to show you what I would use. The more you play things like this, the more you'd figure out what's the easiest way to play it. And that would be because you're assigning each finger to a fret, which I'll show you. I've kind of mentioned this in a previous lesson. But with this one, you'll eventually use your pinky. You could use your third finger too. Sometimes you can reach across and do your third finger to reach those farther notes. But to assign each of mine to a fret here, I'm going to use my pinky. So, the first part should be pretty easy. You can play it with pretty much one finger if you want. So, as you remember from tab, now I kept the names of the strings on the left side here. You won't even see that usually in tab, but that's as a reminder that the open strings we're playing first are the A string, the ones closest to your feet. Even though it's on the top on the tablature, it's the one closest to your feet. Remember, it's like looking at it upside down, like looking at the strings like that. So, the first two notes are open on the A string. So we have, and then 2, second fret, on the E string. So I'm using my first finger because I'm not playing anything on the first fret if I take a quick glance. But later on I'm going to be playing things on the 5th fret. So if I'm assigning each of my fingers to one of these, I can be using my pinky or your third finger for that note on the 5th fret. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Let's start at the beginning. So, open, 0, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2. Okay. Now, like I said with tablature, it doesn't tell you how long to hold notes. It's not about music theory. It's a very quick way to show you what notes are in the song. So when you're approaching tablature, you're approaching it already knowing the melody in your head. So I encourage you to look up as many songs as you want of songs you want to learn. There's so many good resources. If you just type in the name of the song and ukulele tab or ukulele chords, you'll start seeing a lot of the same sites at the top. They have databases of a ton of different songs you can find. And then there's other people, even other libraries that use songs that they're working on, and then they write them out like this to share. So there's so many good resources online. You can look up more current songs if you'd like and play them that way. But anyway, I digress. So I'll play the first part again, and I'm just using this finger. Now on my right hand, you can pick it all with one finger if you want. Eventually, I think it's good to start using a combination of the two. So I alternate back and forth with these ones. And I use my thumb on the ones closest to my head, the top 2 strings. We don't need to do that today. We can go through that another time, but if you want to alternate pick between your first and second finger on your right hand, that would be beneficial. So then I have something like, okay. Now if that's too difficult, if you're just working on getting the melody down, you can pick it all with one finger if you want. On these early stages, I'm not too worried about technique. I just think it's good that for anyone to start getting interested in songs that they want to play. So if you can pick out a melody of one of your favorite songs and strum the chords, that's awesome. Okay, now the second part of the song, this is where you're going to play on the 5th fret. So how I play this part, we kind of already did barring with the B minor chord. you can lay your finger flat for these next two. So I'm on the second line of Camptown Races. There we are. So we have, you can, okay, that's the first line. 2, 2, 0, 5, and I'm getting that with my pinky. You could do it with like your first finger like this, but once you start moving around, it's gonna be one of those situations where you're looking at your fretboard and then looking back at the piece of paper or looking at the screen, then looking back and forth. The reason you're assigning this is twofold. One, so that you don't have to keep looking back and forth, so you know where your hand is at and it's not sliding out of place. And two, it's just about learning the path of least resistance. You can hunt and peck on a keyboard and you might be able to do it fast, but you're going to be limited to the speed you can go. Once you learn home rows on a computer keyboard, you can type a lot faster. So it's kind of the same concept with ukulele or any stringed instrument. You're learning the path of least resistance. So it might feel uncomfortable at first using your pinky, but in the long run, the more you use it, the more comfortable you get used to it, and it's a lot quicker to play back and forth that way than using just one or two fingers. Okay, so the second line is, so I'm laying my finger flat on the middle two strings, 2, 2, 0, 5. Then the next part is all on the A string. Then the last two parts are the same as in the part right above it. So altogether you have okay, so that's the melody. You can play that as much as you want. You can sing along with it. Once you have that in your head, then you can play the chords and the lyrics. So the chords are using some of the chords we just learned in the key of D. And we're excluding the B minor chord because that's kind of tricky chord. And you don't need to play it for this. You can do it with just the D, A, and G chords. So I'm not breaking this down the same way I did with shortening bread in the last lesson. This one I'm showing it to you just as you might find it online. So you're not going to know the exact amount of times to do in a measure. You're approaching this as if you already know the song. So that's what I'm trying to show. Whether you're comfortable with the song or not, if you're looking up a song that you want to learn, one that you already know, you'll probably get it down pretty quickly. So, the strumming patterns. I'm not real strict about teaching one particular strumming pattern because I alternate it to how I want throughout the song, but I kind of start out with like a goal of what I want it to be. We can do 1, 2, 3, and 4 in. Camptown ladies sing this song, do-da, do-da. Camptown racetracks 5 miles long, oh, the do-da day. Going to run all night, going to run all day. I bet my money on the bobtail nag, somebody bet on the bay. So that's basically what's going on with that. If we did break it down, you'd find out that the first part is D for a long time. It's probably about 2 measures. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then where we have the D, A, the do-da, do-da. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and D, A, 3, and 4, and D, A, 3, and 4, and so you'd end up doing the D for 2 whole measures. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. So you could do that without singing if you want to just get comfortable with playing that pattern. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so then on the second part of the verse, where it's Camptown Racetracks, you have 2 measures of 4, and then where it's A and D, it's just 1 measure each. So it's 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4. And so altogether you have 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 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 then we go into the next part. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 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 1, 2, 3, and 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm not going to go through specifics of that song. This is more about showing you a melody in the key of D and some chords in the key of D. If you want specific structures, go through those chord progressions we have in the key of D. This is also about showing you what kind of songs are available online. So if you're searching for songs online that you want to learn, you'll get probably a pretty simplified breakdown like this. And again, I encourage you, if there's new chords on there, go ahead and learn them. A lot of times they show some chords. There are some other simpler chords that we haven't got to yet. So they might be in other keys, or some keys play chords out of the key family. Yes, some do that. But the main chords you'd find in songs are ones within that chord family. So if you're playing in a song in the key of D, you'll most likely come across this A and G chord and maybe that B minor. So, new chord family today. We learned some progressions. You can apply it to this song, but also we know how to play a lot of stuff in the key of C and the key of D. So I encourage you to look up songs that you want to learn. We know a lot of chords now, so we can apply that to a lot of different things. Okay, we covered a lot today. I hope you enjoyed progressing through all this stuff, and now we have a lot more things we can add to your ukulele repertoire. Don't feel like you have to go through these lessons in a week or so. Break each lesson down as much as you need. And you can rewatch these on the library's YouTube channel as much as you want, and download the accompanying paperwork. So, take your time with these. There's more to come, but I hope you've enjoyed this so far. And you got new chords, so have fun with that ukulele. And that's it for now. Bye.